What's up, world? Welcome to the Nola Experience podcast. I am your host, Nola.
Yeah.
And I have my voice back.
Yeah.
I love my voice.
It's cool.
Wow. I lost,
kidding.
for the
It's
people
great.
who have no idea what's going on, over the past maybe over 2 weeks, my voice, I lost it completely. And then I got it back and it was raspy and everybody was like, I like the raspy voice. And
cool.
I was like, wow, nobody likes my regular voice. But I'm back.
She's back.
What's up, Melee?
I'm chilling. I'm chilling like a villain.
You know how I'm feeling. You forgot that part because that's what you usually...
You know, so that's why I ain't say it, because you know how I'm feeling.
So I'm trying to be respectful of you and kinder, because normally when we have a guest, what do?
Oh, you pick on me. Yes.
I don't pick on you. I don't introduce you. I just...
And you pick on me.
Oh,
both.
right.
You know, it's like a double whammy.
I'm sorry. We're going into a new year, 2023. I don't want to pick on people and stuff.
Whoa, slow down. All right. It's still summertime.
Is it?
Slow down.
Isn't this when we start talking about
into a new year?
2023 new me? It's too early.
No. We got to wait till the snow drops.
Well, we have a guest.
Yes.
And we're super excited about this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good friend of the Nola Experience podcast. Please welcome Coach Coop.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? Yeah, I think I have like sound effects, right?
No, but
sound effects?
it's a thought maybe for season 3.
Season 3, we're definitely going to have effects.
Pew, pew,
Nice,
pew.
nice.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have effects.
Applauses, all of that, yeah.
This is a spoiler, actually. Thank you
Yeah,
for
look at
ruining
you.
See?
the
See?
surprise.
Nah, he's just
You-
thinking ahead.
I'm in tune.
You know?
I'm in tune
He's
with,
in tune.
with the growth.
Exactly.
How are you doing? It's so good to see you.
Yeah, same here. I'm doing well. Life is, life, and a lot of amazing things are happening, and from family growth, business growth, everything is well.
Love it.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you
on everything. So today we are discussing hypermasculinity. On a prior episode, we discussed toxic femininity. And I usually like to make sure that things are not necessarily balanced, but somewhat, we're not leaving anybody feeling like, so what happened? Y'all talk about us. What happened to the dudes?
Gotcha.
Want to make sure that we're not doing that. And we thought it would be dope to speak with you because, well, how about you speak a little bit, don't go too much into detail, but tell everybody what you do in the masculinity realm. And then we're going to talk about what exactly is hypermasculinity.
Nice. So first of all, I appreciate you guys asking me to be on the podcast. I am a fan. I have been watching and listening and tuning in and jumping in on your Instagram live conversation. So
thank you.
Shout outs to you, the work that y'all doing and the growth of the podcast. I think is amazing. But I'm Barry Cooper, aka Coach Coop. I'm a transformational life coach, educator. I was once an active educator in the Department of Education for about 10 years. And then in 2017, after just being in different spaces, I seen that young men of color were not exposed to the environment that I was in. I was the dean and director of culture at Eagle Academy. And, in 2017, I said, I want to expand this work. I kind of had my way of doing things, and I created the B.R.O Experience, which stands for Brothers Redefining Opportunity. We're a nonprofit organization that specifically work with young men of color in the realm of self-development and what they call transformational learning.
Wow.
So it's a form of mental health without the negative stigma on it. Yeah, so that's the work without going, diving into deep.
I love that.
Ask questions.
So let me give the world the Wikipedia definition of
The wiki.
Hypermasculinity is a psychological term for the exaggeration of male stereotypical behavior, such as an emphasis on physical strength, aggression, and sexuality. This term has been used ever since the research conducted by Donald L. Mosher and Mark Serkin in 1984. So Mele, do you have any questions before I start going crazy with this conversation? Because I'm excited.
Yes, I was gonna ask, do you feel like there's a issue with hypermasculinity right now?
Hell yeah, absolutely.
Really? Get into it.
Yeah, I think that it's a tremendous issue. I don't think that hypermasculinity is isolated to race. The way people try to phrase it, like hypermasculinity is like only a term that's associated with young men of color or men of color, period. And I don't think that that is, but I don't want to spoil things. So I know you got questions.
Yeah.
But there's I mean, you talked about it a little earlier when you started around toxic feminine, being toxic and being feminine. But yeah, hypermasculinity, I'm just going to jump in there to give context, is the over-exaggeration of like what the male is supposed to present to society. So if you think about, like, I don't know if you guys watch, have Netflix, but you probably do, All American, where they have Black and Latino quote unquote teenagers, but these guys are like grown men.
Yeah.
Supposed to be in high school. So when they take their shirts off.
Yo, they be getting it popping.
Yeah. It's
Even
just like,
sometimes I'm like, Spencer.
yeah, absolutely. Right. So now Spencer is supposed to be 16, but with a
Really?
body of like 4.
That's
so like
funny.
that's the hyper.
So this whole time, let me be quiet. Go ahead.
Yeah, but that's the hyper sexualization of a person of color. So anytime now a boy at 16 or 15 looks at a Spencer, he looks at himself, and now he doesn't feel that he is
Like adequate.
absolutely. Now, toxic masculinity is something that people don't really talk about because they root it heavily in like mental illness when it's just a disorder. I mean, it's still a part of mental illness, but yeah, so toxic masculinity, which is what people need to talk about, is the over-exaggeration of like when a man can't work with a woman, right? A woman can't be his boss. He has like dominant issues. He suffers with empathy. He doesn't have, empathetic spirit. His energy is always off. So that's toxic. And I'm pretty sure you're going to ask me questions to break that down a little bit more, so I don't want to go too far.
Why are you how you know what I'm gonna ask? What,
I don't know, but I just don't want to give too
He's in
much.
tune, remember?
Yeah.
He's
I'm trying to lock in, because I could just keep going.
now I'm picking on Barry. I have to stop.
Every time there's a guest,
I have to
what's up
stop.
with you?
I have to get it together. But seriously though, here's the thing. What we're talking about is probably the exact thing that fuels intimacy in our community, because when the average woman, I hate throwing like numbers and stuff like that out there and saying most and whatever, but a lot of women gravitate to the men who are aggressive and who look like a Spencer. And I mean, I was looking at Spencer, like I had to Google him, like how old is he in real life? Because you know what I'm saying?
No, I don't know. I don't know.
And then I Googled him and discovered he was British, and I was like, right? But no, but honestly, I'm just kidding. What I'm trying to say is we're also programmed to be drawn to that.
Sure.
And it starts very, very young. And I know you work with a lot of kids, and I imagine a little boy fall down or have some type of distress, maybe even an infant, and you're trying to tell this baby or this toddler or this young child, stop crying, you're fine, you're okay. I'm guilty of that. I've done that at some point, because I thought that what I was doing was preparing this person for the world. Like, I'm preparing you to be resilient when really I'm suppressing your experience in that moment. So what was that moment that made you say, I know you mentioned 2017, but was there like an exact moment where you were like, nah, I got to get out there and hit the ground helping these boys?
I mean, that's a really powerful question. I think that all through my life, right? Because I feel like even with the work tied in or what I do, it's just an extension of things that I've experienced personally, and I think I had a front row seat at seeing men from all ages. You know, earlier in my life, in my 20s, I owned a barbershop. So, you know, cutting hair, I seen every type of man, right? I mean, it ran a gamut, right? So being able to experience from 8 to 88 every day of my life, I started to be able to distinguish like, okay, well, the way that I may show up from being in the neighborhood that I grew up in, you know, this black man is coming in and he might be from a different state or a different experience and he doesn't operate the same way we do. And it started to spark my interest of why. And I think that kind of like fueled my passion to want to learn how people like behaviors and all of those different things. So when I got into Eagle Academy and I started to see what nurturing looks like and how young men can make mistakes, but there was someone there to give them the balance and still allow them to fail, it really fueled me to want to go out in the community and expand the work. So I don't know if it was like just one pivotal time, but it was just a duration. And in my own personal life, you know, being a young dad and knowing what that breakup was and the relationship with my daughter's mom and not really having the answers because my father didn't know how to give me the answers that I guess I was searching for. I just said to myself, I don't want to ever allow or be in a space where young men are experiencing what I'm going through. And that was a dark moment in my life where, you know, had not gone through that, I think that I wouldn't be the man I am today, but it still was an experience that people were telling me, oh, suck it up. You know, oh, that's just a relationship. And I wasn't in that space. I was hurt. You know, I was like crying. I was depressed. I had my own personal things that I was going through. So if it was a pivotal moment, I think it was that breakup. And then it just catapulted me into this work, wanting to create spaces for young men to be in their darkest moments, young men to be able to express what those darkest moments are, and then also being able to say like, yo, I'm happy as well. I think sometimes we do focus on the negative when it comes to young men of color. So we just give space for feelings, period.
I think that's kind of what fueled the Black Boy Joy movement. People felt really strongly about highlighting those moments because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about Black boys and men on TV, most of the time it's, okay, somebody's running from the police or, you know, somebody's in some type of trouble doing whatever. So that's really, really powerful. But I'm curious to know, what age do you think, specifically for boys, what age do you think would be the most appropriate to start focusing on mental health?
Birth.
Right? Oh, yeah,
Like,
as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you know, especially for boys, yeah, like they need to be held, hugged at every juncture of their growth. This misconception that through hypermasculinity, like they already want to be Spider-Man, Superman, and all of these action figures that they can never be, right? Because it's not real. So they need to have space where they are able to fall down, cry as long as they need, as long as you are there, and then you should walk them through that process. I mean, I do that now with my 1-year-old. And I think that should not stop. I think that every human being, but specifically men and men of color, need to be able to have a space to emote. And it needs to be safe for them, because if not, then the images and the perceptions that they get from society stops them from feeling. And if they're numb to what it is that they're going through because somebody told them to suppress that, then we wonder why we have relationships that never are successful.
Yeah. I heard something you said stuck out to me, like when you were saying that, you know, you were going through issues and people were telling you just suck it up. And in my mind, I heard the phrase, be a man. Mm-hmm. Like that's a phrase that you hear a lot. Like people say, oh, just be a man, be a man. What, like, you know, especially this day and age, like I feel like that rhetoric is like, people want to get rid of it and change it. But part of me feels like there is like, I don't know. Do you feel like there's some type of positivity to that? There's some type of like something that we need to hold on when it comes to that and not just completely disregard like the be a man aspect of like, I know how they meant it, but do you think we can evolve that phrase into something better?
That's a great question.
That is a great question, but I guess in my short term, and we would have to just do research on like, what is it? Like, what does it mean to be a man?
Sure.
I think that people say that out of their own fear, frustration, and consideration around what they're experiencing based on what you're experiencing, right? So if you have parents who see you in a vulnerable state and they say like, man up or be a man.
Man up is the other one, yeah.
Yeah, like where is that coming from for them? Where they can't say like, yo, I hear you.
True.
Right,
That's
like,
true.
If we don't know, you can't even really define what manhood is. Like, what is manhood? What is healthy masculinity? That's just a human being able to express and communicate their feelings and the things that they're experiencing. So I don't need to be a man. I just need to be heard. So, so I guess in the short term, telling someone to man up instead of saying be resilient.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because language is very important. Yes. What do you mean, man up? So you're just like literally telling me that I'm not a man because I am emoting?
Like men don't do this. Men don't cry. Men don't
I'm acting feelings. Like Melee now. Ooh.
Is like, it's already a full start. You're saying that because you feel away because I feel away. Now your feelings that you're experiencing is real because you love me, mom, dad, sister, brother, friend, best friend, whatever.
And that's all they know.
Yeah. So you're trying to suppress my feelings so that way you feel better.
You feel away because I feel away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gaslighting.
So a couple of things came up. You mentioned this before, and then it's coming up for me again. Whereas we do have men who are insanely insecure about how they feel because it's not in alignment with what a man should be feeling and in alignment with what a man should be doing. So we do have a lot of guys walking around like, oh, let me not do that. I can't do this because...
That's not what a man does.
Right. And that also causes issues in relationships. So you do have the men who are overly, feeding into that stereotype of I'm aggressive, I have to look like Adonis. And then you have men who are the opposite and they're like, I don't have those things, but this is me naturally, but nobody's going to accept that, I'm a little softer and I'm sensitive to other people's feelings and I'm empathetic and maybe I'm too skinny or maybe chubby or whatever. And that ends up translating into toxic relationships too.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think everything you said was like spot on. But I mean, this Western civilization and this culture that I'm trying, I don't want to go there. I got to touch on it lightly, but it's the social constructs. Like masculinity and femininity is a social construct. So anything that is like socially constructed by groups of people can have a mental implication on especially those who come from communities that don't have the resources to filter the things that we see and we experience. So when we think of young men of color going through this idea of like, oh, I don't look like that. And then on that flip side, like, I will never be that, right? Because I may have a softer side to myself. Yeah. It becomes very difficult. And if they do not have spaces that allow them to be as authentic as they want, and they don't have spaces that are going to be brave where they're like the space is brave enough to uplift whatever that young man presents, and also gives that young man a space to be brave within his own right and his own being, you'll never build connection.
Oh, this is making me sad.
Yeah, it is sad. It's because even if you think about the programs that exist to support young men through this idea of hypermasculinity and toxic masculinity, all of it is post-incarceration. Oh. It's just like either post-incarceration or they tell single moms to put your son in sports, which I love sports. I like watching basketball and football, but if you really think about the science of it, it's about hypermasculinity.
That is so interesting because, again, I did the same thing when Pharaoh was little. We put him in soccer, we put him in basketball. And the moment he was old enough to articulate, he was like, I don't like sports, right?
Oh, wow.
He was like, I don't like sports. And I took him out. But there was still this little thing in the back of my head, like, is this going to be okay?
Yeah.
But it can get balanced, right? Like, why does it have to, it doesn't have to be an either or. It's like, if you put him in a sport, right, that is designed to, because not to say that sports don't give our young people, it gives them team building, it gives them a whole host of other things, but too much of one thing is too much of one thing. Just like, you know, it would be beautiful for our children to grow up in two-parent homes or two co-parenting situations, right? Because what mom gives, dad doesn't, and what dad gives, mom can't. So if he is in a sport, also put him in art. If he's in sport, also put him in chess. If he's in the sport, also allow him to go to therapy. They need both, right? Like, sports don't teach you how to tap into every aspect of your mental well-being.
Sure.
It's one part. It's physical, and then it teaches you the resilience that we talked about earlier.
Sure.
I like that. I like that it appeals to the whole person, right? Which is what we fail to do. And
absolutely,
as much as I don't force anything on him, I still had that construct like brewing in my head. Somewhere in my head, I'm like,
is this right?
Like,
is this gonna be okay?
He, you know, the physical aspect of it, is he gonna be,
you want to toughen him up,
right? Is he gonna be physical enough? So I'm currently listening to Gabrielle Union's book called, I think it's called You're Gonna Need Something Stronger or something like that. But she discusses her relationship with her stepson, who I am still not very versed on the terms when it comes to trans. But his son, Dwayne, her husband, Dwayne Wade, his son went through a couple of phases with identity. And I remember her saying that because he's a basketball player, they move around a lot. Professional basketball player, they move around. And the kids would go to different schools. So every time they go to a new school,
you have to adjust. She
would have to go to the school. Gabrielle would go to the school and have like a discussion. And she says, this is how she says, she's like, okay, so here's the deal, right? That's how she starts. And she said when they went to, I believe, California, she went to her daughter, because at this point, that's what she's identifying as. And she's like, what do you want me to tell them that you're identifying as? And that was just a conversation that they had over and over because it would change.
Really?
So I wanted to get your take on this new space that we're in, where we're adjusting to people saying, or people being very vocal about the fact that femininity and masculinity, they are constructs.
So I can choose whichever one I want.
Listen, that is such a hard thing to even come out of my throat. Like my throat hurts right now. Because from the moment I came into this world, people were giving me dolls and telling me, this is what you do.
You wear these colors.
Period. So now we have these new people in the world who are standing up for what they're experiencing and standing very hard.
It's true. Yeah.
How do you feel about? Do you feel it's confusing? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about your son seeing it? Mm-hmm. How does it affect you?
I mean, not until you just brought it up right now, it doesn't impact me at all. And I'm maybe because I'm like a philosophy buff. So, I think back to Roman times, like in historically, men and women have been, same sex, same gender relations. Like that is not new. Now, because of social constructs, when it comes to in our culture here in America, it's this thing because they need to keep people oppressed. So to your point of how we've been raised on G.I. Joe, you've been raised on Barbie. But had the roles been reversed and they would have given you the G.I. Joe and given us the Barbie, right? And told us that we would have to be, men are soft and women are Amazonian. We would have just been raised in it. So I think that we as humans have to be willing to just be open, right? Because people are different. And whether it's hard for us to digest, because I'm like you, maybe like 10 years ago, I was working in a space and there were two, they identified as men. I still work with them, and they identified as he. It took me a long time to get to a point where I would say him or his or, what's up, bro? Like I would say that to these individuals, and that was my own implicit bias. So when it comes to my children or my son or even young men or young women who may identify as being a young man, they can come into the bro space, right? Because what I care about is the communication with people. What we care about is the healthy balance for human beings, right? Because we all are human. That means that there's color, there's difference, there's different shades. It's just so many different things. So we're going to preach balance.
Like that.
If we're going to preach balance and we're going to all say that we are human, then color is involved in that. And it may look different, and that's okay. What are you afraid of? So if my son, if August, who's 1, gets older and he identifies that he loves the same sex.
What if at 3 years old, he's like, you know what, Dad? Stop buying these pants for me. I want dresses.
Then I'm going to let him wear a dress.
Okay.
What's going to happen? And the only sad part is that a Gabrielle Union, like a Barry Cooper or a Shantini, will have to go into the school and protect them for that, from that.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, listen, I do agree that it is a construct.
Absolutely.
But it's so deeply rooted.
Yes.
It's very uncomfortable to navigate. So let me tell you this, which I found super interesting. One day, I'm not going to say where I picked my son up from because I don't want to expose anyone who might not. But I picked him up and I had no reason to ask this question except I was hearing about something on the radio. So I was like, Pharaoh, do you know anyone who, is a certain gender, but they want to be called something else? And he said, yeah, such and such. And I was shocked because I didn't know. He said she wants to be called they. And I was like, oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. So we moved on. Fine. Fast forward about 2 years. This year, another situation, I called a certain place and I'm on the phone, I'm hearing a woman and I'm expecting it's a woman, but when the person gave me their name, it's a man's name. So then I was like, oh, maybe this person has one of those
soft voice
unisex names.
Oh yeah,
right?
okay. Names, yeah.
So I get to the location for a meeting and I see a guy and I'm like, oh, okay. So this is what's happening. All right, cool. No problem. Whatever.
No problem.
I can never remember to address him as him.
Yeah.
So when I speak about this person with Pharaoh, I keep saying she. Saying her, she. And he keeps correcting me. He's like, Mom, it's him. And I asked him one day, I was like, whenever you encounter people who look a certain way, but they identify, or you're not sure, how do you find out how to address them? Because we had a podcast episode about people being upset that you don't know how to address them. I'm like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So I asked him, what do you do when you encounter a person and you're not sure? He says, I ask them.
That's simple.
Or just say their name.
That's simple, right?
And I was like, oh shit. I was overthinking this. I made this so intense. I made
what do we do?
Yeah.
Ask them.
But it goes
I never
back
thought to ask.
Yeah, it goes back to the man up, right? Like it becomes about the other person, not about it becomes about the person who was trying to help out, or you trying to be respectful. And the real respect comes from what do you like to be referred as? And then what goes even further, and this is how you build connections, say, hey, I'm not used to saying that. So if I do say that, if I do call you he or outside of what you identify with, please forgive me. It's something that I'm working on.
And I think that's really dope that you just gave people language for this, because we didn't have the language before. We were just like,
what we gonna put it in the comment section?
But you know what's funny? So I asked Pharaoh, I was like, so how do you feel when you see someone who you might think it's a guy, but it's a girl, or vice versa? How do you feel? He's like, I don't mind. And it's really because he's coming into this world where that's what it is.
Yes. Yeah. When we grew up in the total opposite, it was like boys are boys, girls are girls, period. No blurred lines, nothing.
But I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna front. Like my ego kicked in a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, I did a good job here." I kind of made
say that.
I kind of made that about me a little bit, because that's what I teach him. Like we do not discriminate. Like no matter what I'm feeling in the back of my head, because there's a lot of unlearning to do. You know what I mean? I do my very best to make sure that I'm not putting anybody out of place because I'm uncomfortable with something that has nothing to do with me. But he's cool. He's like, I don't mind.
That's crazy.
But let's think about that though, right? So that's you suppressing whatever it is that we may experience, because our generation is totally different from our children. But what if the parents don't have that insight? So we talk about hypermasculinity and toxic masculinity as a social construct. The first socialization that happens in any young person's life is in their household. So when we talk about bad relationships, and we talk about men of color in particular showing this over exaggeration of male dominance and can't work with women and only see women as objects, where does that come from? If it's a social construct, before they even are able to watch TV on their own, because when they watch TV, they looking at Big Bird, they looking at things that from inception.
Birds that are yellow,
Elmo's absolutely. Red,
they
learning letters, words, so they're not learning how to navigate and have judgment, and all that stuff is learned from the parent.
Sure.
And if the parent doesn't have awareness, then guess what? That young person doesn't have any awareness, and then magazines and newspapers are not designed to give any healthy balance, and boom, because we live in a consumer society. So we live in a consumer society that breeds hypermasculinity and hyperfemininity as well. Women have to look a certain way, men have to look a certain way, and then next thing you know, it's like it's just a ball of divorces and single parent.
It makes perfect sense why relationships just everybody's just bumping heads, and everybody's like, why are they like this?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Well, I feel like there is somewhat of a war going on. Nola, cover your ears. Kevin Samuels. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. Rest in peace, Kevin Samuels. So I used to watch some of his videos. I would just call myself a viewer, not so much like a follower or a fan, but a viewer. I appreciated some of the things that he said, a lot of things that he said, more than not. And I think me watching his videos kind of put me in an algorithm of like, put me in the algorithm of that war that I'm talking about. There's a lot of men out there who feel like there is a war on masculinity. Like they are, like it's crazy. Like I don't know if you're in the zeitgeist of what I'm talking about, but there is like a real niche of men who are just like, not, I wouldn't say bashing women, but like kind of just going against a lot of the things that that are being said by women. You know, they're bashing Cardi B songs because, you know, bro, don't know, no, I know that's right. You know, so like, I feel like there's a silent war going on. How do you feel about that? Do you think that there's a war on masculinity? Like women are trying to overpower, or feminists are trying to overpower masculinity and kind of take it over, so to speak?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I'm trying not to. That's a tricky question. I don't want to get myself.
Yeah, I hear you.
Tied
I
up
hear
in
you.
something.
Tread lightly.
So I'll say, how can I say this?
Speak your truth, brother. Speak.
No,
your
I'm definitely gonna do that. But
yeah, I hear you.
because in me saying it, I think that I want to shift perspective for men, right? So if we're gonna start the conversation saying that everything that we see in media for the most part is from a hyper masculine space. Everything that we buy in pop culture, which runs the world, is from a hyper exaggerated space. Then this understanding of like femininity and what that is, and people and women need to understand what femininity is, right?
Sure.
Because there is toxic femininity as well.
Sure.
And I think that that's the war. So it's two toxic constructs and people embodying these two toxic constructs, and one is trying to liberate itself from the other, where if both man and woman, if human really understands that I just need to communicate in a way where I build bridges. So I think about my relationship when you asked me that question, right? So Shantini, my fiance, she has an understanding of life in the way that she does, and I have an understanding in life in the way that I do. But one thing that we both keep in our sights is when we interact with one another, our biases are going to definitely come up. You don't get rid of your biases. But I ask myself as a man, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to prove her wrong? Am I trying to dominate her, or am I trying to build understanding? So when I think like that, it forces me to now communicate in a way where I'm able to articulate what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling, healthy masculinity. So that way, as my counterpart, she can digest it in a way where she can respond back with her authenticity, but feminine, right? Where it's a feminine energy that's coming back because I'm not trying to dominate. So I think that that's the true war that we don't talk about. Women, and y'all talked about it in your last show, there's toxic femininity where women are raised by mothers who have been abused, who suffer, who have been through things and poured that into them. But then they also raise sons on a cold level of dependency that none of us talk about. So now you have this young girl who grows up, becomes a woman, and all she thinks about is power. All she thinks about is like, I have to have this job. I got to present myself this way. And then you have this young man who's been taken care of, right? And nurtured differently than this girl. Now they get together and he's like, yo, why you?
Yeah.
My moms don't be acting like this.
Yeah.
You wilding, you chilling, chill out. And then she like, well, why you not manning up? And now we got a war.
What a mess.
That's so true.
People never want to think about that. They never talk about that.
Yeah, so
you definitely
there's
broke it
another
down.
aspect of this. We're winding down, but there's another aspect that I think is super important. So a part of this, the aggressive part of hypermasculinity is just risky behavior. You know, a lot of times people are like, why do girls like the bad boys? The one who's gonna drive fast, the one who's probably using substances or risky behavior, promiscuous, whatever. And it's attractive to a lot of women because you're living on the edge, and this guy who can have anybody, he's choosing you, right? So that's something that's very prevalent where I grew up. I saw that a lot. If you look too soft, and I feel like I'm manly enough, I'm gonna punch you in the face for no reason.
Whoa.
And that's what I saw growing up. And we were like, oh, he punched you in the face, whatever. And we were cool with that, right? But it's actually a very, very sad thing. And with your work, I know that you run into a lot of boys and young men who are probably out there just wilding out, and you kind of have to help them. How do you even convince them, like, you don't need to be in the streets or wherever you are doing what you're doing, which, you know, you're trying to prove yourself as a man to the world, but really what are they doing to their lives? Are they ruining it? Are they, because what you might look at as a ruined life is just an experience that, you know, helps you. So.
Yeah. So first I think of it like that. I don't think of anybody's life as ruined.
From one decision.
But I think that you brought up some major things. So like that risky behavior is more from a standpoint of a high, right? Like we think about substance and why people use drugs. You know, risky behavior. That's some people get like drugged on toxicity. Like they need to be in toxic situations.
The drama is addictive.
Absolutely. We look at reality TV all day. That may not be your relationship personally, but you in there like biting your fingernails because it's like, ooh, what's next? So we all subscribe to toxicity to some degree, right? Even with algorithms on social media. If you start going through your thread and you see crazy stuff on your thread, that's something that you're looking at, right? Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg just looked at your algorithms and said, all right, this is what this person
you like fighting?
Give them more. Absolutely. Yeah. So now to the point of the young men that we work with and how we get them to identify. First, it's in my practice and what I train my facilitators in, it's not my job to tell you how you're supposed to live your life. That's not my space as a human being. It's biblical. No man can direct another man's steps.
I like that.
Right? So I don't go in trying to tell my young men how to be. What I do and what I train my team is be an example. So if the expectation is for growth to be evident in the space, they have to see growth in you. So if I have young men, I have a young man, Tyrell, we call him Leroy. He's been with me since he was 12. He's 25.
Wow.
From the time that he was 12, he's seen elevation in myself. And now that he's 25, we have conversations where he's able to teach me things because he's the man, he's the man of the world today.
I love it.
And I give him that space. But then to further that in our group settings, we create, and I think we talked about this a little earlier, offline, where we create like music therapy. So I use a lot of Kendrick Lamar. And it makes me think of a session that we did actually a couple of weeks ago where we broke down the song Father's Time from his new album. And in the session,
that song.
It talks about like how Kendrick's father or a father figure kind of like showed up in a negative light. And we talked about what happens when you get a girl pregnant. Like, what do you feel? Anybody? So I asked the group, anybody ever had that experience? And like 3 guys raised their hand. I was like, what was the feeling? They was like, I was afraid. And then one guy, and it became a little joke session. I let them joke. They was like, I became afraid of her. So I allowed them to say all of these negative things about their experience. And then I turned around and said, well, guess what? How many of you guys were raised with your father? Only one of them raised their hand.
What?
And then he said, I said, do you live with them? He said,
wait,
no.
One of the 3 or one of the group?
No, it was like one out of the group. It must have been
Wow.
11 or 12 of them. One raised their hand. And I said, well, guess what? Everything that y'all were afraid of and your interactions that y'all could identify with, that's what your fathers felt.
Ooh.
And the whole room was like, Ooh. It was like this. It was this like transformation, like was like standing in the middle of our circle.
Wow.
And one of the young men said, like, I never thought of that.
Wow.
And then another
I've
guy
never
said,
thought of
I thought
that.
it was,
Yeah.
I thought he hated me. And they're 17, 18, 19, and 20 in the space. And I'm like, but you get that? So to answer the question, that's where the change come in. We create space where possibility, we say what we do is we excavate untapped potential. So like who you are is already inside of you.
Yes.
All of us are like trees. When you get a seed, all of the minerals, all of the energy is already inside of that seed. You just have to nurture it and expose
Absolutely.
it to the elements, right? Positive elements
An
and that tree will
environment.
grow.
Yes.
So that's what we do. And then they walked out with distinction. They walked out with understanding. They walked out with a new sense of purpose around fatherhood and what manhood should be for them, right? Wasn't something that I designed. It was their thoughts, their answers, and then they're able to like walk away with that confidence. So I feel like that's how you combat, and that's how you try to, shift the narratives a bit.
Well, we love solutions. We have a lot of problems that we can talk about all day long, but we definitely want to tap into the flip side of it. All right, we can talk about the problems and the issues. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
So thank you
Yes.
for waking up every day and saying, you know what? I'm gonna grab some people by the neck and lead them to water. And obviously it's up to them to drink it. So who can contact you? Collaborators, boys? Who do you, usually expect to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, any and everybody who wants to take a stand specifically for young men of color. Our organization is unique in a way that we understand that job readiness is a thing. We understand that exposing young men to other different realms are very important. So our nucleus is merely self-development and mental stability. So that's what our space does. We get young men to a space where they're able to have the confidence, authenticity, the bravery, and the connection so that anything they touch in life, all of the external stuff works for them. So any organization could go to www.thebroexperience.org. They can follow us on all our social media platforms. It's just the Bro Experience.
Love that.
And you can follow me, Coach Coop _ Yeah. And I mean, I'm out here. So we're doing the work. It's real.
What about your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is on hiatus. It's dating my best friend. It's me and my soon-to-be wife.
Oh, wow. That's
soon-to-be wife, Shantini. And, we coined the phrase, just two souls trying to figure it out. So we navigate, we talk about relationships from a standpoint that is like, not like, I guess, podcasts that are out there. Like, we found like our true love later in life. So, we try to give advice or create space for conversation for those singles who are out there that's in their 30s and their 40s and, letting them know that it's okay if you haven't found your it, just as long as you love yourself enough. So
okay.
After we get married, we're going to hopefully come back with it, but
I love it.
Yeah,
that's
we
great.
do talk
I
about
love
it.
that.
Like when she does my facials, as I go to her spa,
You talk about
we do talk about you. And
I hope it's good thing.
no, she loves you.
Nah,
said
that's
no.
good. That's good. That's
She
good.
loves
No,
you.
she loves you.
And
Yeah, that's
I
beautiful.
even told her, like, I've known you first. And I'm like, this is a good dude, girl. And she was like, oh, thank you for saying that. And I tell you too, if you meet her, you're like, does this person ever have another side? Because she's just so sweet
Really?
and so nurturing. And those facials be bomb.
Yeah. I'll tell
shout
y'all
out
this.
her spa as well.
Shantini taught me how to relove. I think that before I met her, even doing the work, I had a jaded understanding of what love was and how you hold it. And I had this mindset of like, after going through failed relationships where it was like, I cut myself off from the possibility of giving all of who I am to another individual. And so much so that in the start of our relationship, when we got together, I was intoxicated by the amount of love that she gave just unconditionally, that I just jumped into the relationship. But I still had those old behaviors.
Yes.
And there was things that I did in the beginning of the relationship of like texting women and always keeping one ready
'Cause you never
available that I wasn't even
One in the
conscious
chamber.
of.
Right.
Yeah.
Like being a flirt and kind of like utilizing my ability to charm in a way that was like disserving. And then for the women who were experiencing it, they didn't even know that none of that stuff I even meant.
Sure.
And then she found out about that. And when I dimmed her light in our relationship.
Yeah.
I cried harder than she did. She looking at me like, you messed up, but it was.
I get that.
I wasn't even connected to the
when
source.
you know you hurt your friend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing, yeah.
So in that moment, being toxic myself, luckily I had the tools that once it was exposed that that's who I was being, I was able to, turn that stuff off and work, and we were able to redefine our relationship. But it was the beauty that she has,
and
for people
beauty
is
on the
amazing.
outside too.
Yeah,
Y'all,
absolutely.
This
absolutely.
woman is pretty.
Yeah, so
I don't know how you did that, but beautiful woman. So, Mele, any questions before we take a deep breath? And
I got so many questions, but we got to go into the next segment. We gotta move on. We have to. But it was such a pleasure having you for real. And like she said, bless you for doing the work that you do, because it's important. It really is.
All right, so
you got it.
we're gonna jump into segment 2, SOA Q&A. But I felt like that was very intense for me.
Yes.
Like
Breath.
we have to breathe. We have to
Breathing
shift
time.
the energy. So we're gonna take a deep breath and release all of that stuff. You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now we ready for the ratchetness?
I'm all for it.
All right. So
It's the SOA Q&A, aka adrenaline question of the day. Bam.
damn, it took us a while, but we got it. We got it.
Yeah.
What's the most embarrassing fashion trend I used to rock?
That's a good one.
To be completely honest, I'm not embarrassed about anything at all, but I can tell you something that was weird looking back. In high school, we used to put our hair up in a ponytail and then fan it out.
Yes, I remember.
Like it literally looked like a fan.
Chun-Li.
You know what I'm talking about? It literally looked like a fan. You
The
just
Street Fighter.
comb it up and spritz it and keep it stiff, so it literally looked like a fan. But
too
I don't,
funny.
when my younger pictures come up, I love that stuff. Like
Really?
when people are embarrassed, I'm like, I look jacked up, but
Well, we're gonna put a picture of Nola in the post-production.
I only have 2
with the
pictures from
hairstyle.
childhood. I'll show them to you.
Oh dang!
But I don't have any
You're probably
pictures.
cute. Childhood.
Of course I was cute. What
We
happened?
need the high school.
I don't
with
need
the acne,
I don't need
with
reassurance.
the
What's the
acne
next
and the
question?
braces.
Can we get Coach's question? This is
Something that I did at 19 that I would not do today. Roller coasters. I would not ride roller coasters at 40.
Whoa,
Yes.
that's
so,
a good one because I don't ride roller coasters.
Yeah. so
Okay,
I'm
what's the
not-
reason?
Just my heart. It's a different. You got a different heart at 19. At 40, I might be on
true,
the scream
though.
machine. That might be my last scream.
That's
That's something
facts.
I think about.
That's
So
facts,
I try my
heart.
best to that and my bladder. My bladder, 19 bladder versus down on the screen machine.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
not.
fact.
I just be like, I don't want to experience
People on
that.
the ground be like, is it raining? Like,
Yeah. So I would not
Tastes a
ride.
little salty.
I would not get on roller coasters. My daughter hates that, but I'm
Wow,
not doing it.
interesting. Okay.
Who would be on my MySpace top 8 in 2022? This is super controversial because it was controversial back then.
Exactly.
Like, it was a problem. Like if you had your bestie not on your top 8.
Why
it
am
would
I
be
not
a
on your top
problem.
8? And then there was a top 4.
Yeah,
Jeez.
and then yeah. Well, it used to be a top 4, and then
Yeah.
they did, it was like, all right, we'll open it up
Yeah,
top 8.
too much drama.
Yeah. Top 8. Of course, you guys.
Good answer. Good answer.
Like,
Good
I like
answer.
being here. No, I think you guys would be on my top 8.
Yeah, we have to.
You guys, so that's 2. Obviously, wifey. My daughter would probably have her MySpace page. No, I'm kidding. No, she might.
Yeah,
Because she
Yeah.
has an Instagram. So,
Absolutely.
so yeah, my brother, that's 5.
This
Dang.
Brothers.
I would have to put my dad. My dad's one of those dads, like, he'd be like, you don't follow me on Facebook, man.
Oh, yeah, gotta put-
Like
gotta
he's
put
one of
five.
those.
Hold on. So we have 1, 2, 3,
got 6
4,
seconds.
5, 6. All right.
Six, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so I would have to. My mom would not care, so she probably wouldn't even want me to put her on the top 8. So I'm not gonna say my mom,
But why wouldn't you put her as your top 8?
because she's
wouldn't
so like reserved that she would be like, "Take me off your page right now." Like,
gotcha,
she's
gotcha.
one of those. Like she's hidden on Facebook. She doesn't even have her real name. That's how she's
Incognito.
so private. Yeah. So she would probably not even want me to put her up there. Dang, who am I missing? 2 more, right? Okay, I gotta do. Oh, I got 2 brothers. So my other brother,
Right.
and I have a sister. So my sister.
All right. You missed somebody, but I'm not
did?
going to. Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to say it.
Skip it.
Oh man, no best friends or
Dang,
nothing.
who am I
Yup.
missing? Oh, I am. Okay.
Woo, we.
Don't take me off.
They
I'm
ain't
already
on
there.
social media.
She'll be all right.
All right. Yeah, that's it.
Dope. What ancient time period would I live in for 5 years? Definitely the period where Hatshepsut was pharaoh. I would want to be her friend, first of all. I want to see how she finessed her way into being a pharaoh.
Yeah.
What did that look like? Because I know it had to be savage.
Yeah.
They don't tell you the whole story because during those times, we already know women struggle a lot today, but those times it's tenfold. So what did that look like? Did she kill people?
That's so
Like,
crazy. I was literally looking.
I'm imagining
into
her
that
sneaking
today.
down the hallways, just slitting people's throats. Like,
Oh, you like that?
I am the new pharaoh now.
That's toxic.
I know. Toxic femininity.
how did she do it? You know?
That's awesome.
What rapper would I want to narrate my autobiography? Kendrick Lamar, hands down.
That's a good one.
The best storyteller that of this day and age, and I'm starting to feel like period when it comes to writing. So I'm a diehard fan. So Kendrick.
Okay, that's a good one.
We spoke about this last.
Yes, at some point.
What's the biggest difference between my generation and my parents' generation? We know. We spoke about this last time. Where do we start? The schools cost more. I guess just in general, everything costs more. Everything costs more. Like I forgot how much my parents said they bought their house for when we lived in Queens, but it was like a ridiculous number that you wouldn't even imagine a house costing today, especially in New York. So yeah, just that, like the way that everything has like doubled, tripled, quadrupled in price, hands down, this is the biggest difference.
I thought for sure you were going to say social media, but
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, that's a big one too.
That's a cliche one.
They can have social media. Just give me the low house, the cheap houses. Give me the cheap houses.
Facts.
You can keep the social media.
I hear you. All right. That was amazing, guys. That was so much fun.
Good times.
Coach,
Yep.
once again, thank you
Pleasure.
so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for
Appreciate your
Thank you.
presence.
Yes.
Appreciate what you're doing in the world. I don't knock anybody who decides, listen, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to watch Netflix and go to work. No problem with that.
Yeah,
but
you ain't hurting nobody.
I love it. It feels better when you have people who are like, you know what, I'm going to do something. Because we all complain. So gratitude to you.
Thank you.
And gratitude to Shantini. You know, I'm going to give shout her out because that's my girl.
She loves.
So shout out to her for supporting you so that you can come out and be a better self and continuing to evolve. Shout out to everybody that tuned in. And if you want to get in touch with Coach for whatever reason, whether you're a boy, organization, parent.
Anybody who want to take a stand for young men of color in particular, because when we do that, when we make sure that they're safe, it makes our community safer. So
Yes.
It's facts,
reach out to
facts.
me.
Big facts.
So thebroexperience.org.
Awesome.
All right. Follow us on Instagram, the Nola Experience Podcast. Make sure you are liking. I'm tired of telling people to like and subscribe. Y'all don't know how to do
gotta
this
do it.
by now.
You gotta do it.
Get into it. All right. Appreciate
Like,
you
subscribe,
for tuning in.
comment, share. Yeah. Peace.